but you were reading about the Byzantine Empire. Now, chapter 6, in chapter 6, we spend some time very quickly looking at three sections. And these three sections of chapter 6 talk about some civilizations in the East. We're gonna look at some civilizations in Eastern Europe. That would be the Byzantine Empire, and then the Russian kingdom, and then we'll look at the Arab Muslim Empire, and we'll kind of look at Islam here over the next couple of days. Now, our discussion of the Byzantine civilization and our discussion of these civilizations in the East will be short. You remember how I told you that this class is a class that could be titled Western Civilization. In other words, we're going to look at those civilizations of Western Europe, and then those civilizations that have been born from the civilizations in Western Europe. So we're going to kind of focus on the West, but it's important that we talk about the Byzantine Empire. It's important that we talk about the Byzantine Empire because of the role, and really the Islamic Empire also, because of the role that these empires played in the development of the West. Sometimes the actions of our neighbors affect us. And as we look at the Byzantine Empire, we're going to see how the Byzantine Empire was actually a strong security guard or a strong gatekeeper that helped protect Europe during some days when Europe was weak and the Arab Muslim Empire was very powerful and could have conquered, taken over, and taken over Europe. And so I want us to take a look at some of these things. Well, let's go through these just in the sections that they are. First of all, let's talk about the development of the Arab Muslim Empire. Let's talk about the development there. Now, you read in your text, you with us, Chris? Okay, you read in your text about the way the the Byzantine Empire was founded. The Byzantine Empire actually got its start through some of the reforms, hey Chris, if you will, just don't prop up. You put your hands down, and I know you're awake there, and it really looks like you're doing the cover up. I have to confess, I did the cover up in church Sunday. It happened to me. I was sitting there, and at first I was reading my Bible, but then I kind of dozed off. A few minutes later, I woke up. I looked around. I don't think anybody saw me. Their Sunday school teacher, Susan, in church, but it happened. All right, so notice you read how the Byzantine Empire got its start as the Roman Empire was trying to make reforms, as they had this huge territory to govern, this huge territory to cover, and they started making reforms so that they could manage it better. As you had, what's going on the other day? This was working just fine. Now we're having problems. Okay, New Rome, the Byzantine Empire, was sort of established by Constantine as he established this capital, New Rome. He called it New Rome. Now later, it became called Byzantium because New Rome was a city that was built on an old and in the area of an old Greek city called Byzantium. So a lot of the local inhabitants just kept calling it Byzantium, even though he wanted it called New Rome, and many of his faithful Roman followers wanted it called Constantinople. Now, the city officially lasted as Constantinople probably for the longest, but the city by the locals was called Byzantium for the name of that Greek city. Now, in AD 476, we've already read about how Western Rome falls. As a matter of fact, Western Rome, the city of Rome, was actually conquered by some Germanic tribesmen. They came in and they conquered it at a time, and then the western portion of Rome, Western Europe, sort of ceased to exist as an empire. Now, there were still plenty of people there, and we're going to see later that some Frankish kingdoms, some of the Germanic tribes established some kingdoms there, but Western Rome falls. Now, Eastern Rome, or Byzantium, had already been established through some of the reforms of Theodosius and Constantine, Diocletian. And so Eastern Rome, or the Byzantine Empire, continues. Now notice these dates. 476 is when West Rome falls. Now according to what you read last night, would any of you happen to remember when the Byzantine Empire falls at the Battle of Manzikert? Katie?
1071.
It wasn't 107. Was it Leo?
May 13, 1453.
1453. Now I want you to pay attention to 1453. 476, 1453. Almost 1,000 years. Almost 1,000 years after the fall of West Rome, Byzantium falls. Okay, so Byzantium survives West Rome. That is, she outlives West Rome by how long? 1,000 years, right? 1453. By the way, what happens in 1492? Christopher Columbus sails the ocean blue, right? 1492, he discovers the New World. At the time, year-wise, at the time, the same century, when the Byzantine Empire is falling, Western Europe is emerging into modernization, into the military power that she can fight off, defend herself from. She can fight off and defend herself from the Arab Muslim Empire of Asia. Now, I want you also to pay attention to this idea. In 1492, we know Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But of European significance, what else happens in 1492? Spain, King Ferdinand, Queen Isabella, they do get married, and they complete the Reconquista, which is the driving of Moors, or North African Muslims, out of the Iberian Peninsula and Spain. So I want you to pay attention to that. As in the East, the Byzantine Empire is falling to Muslims. In the West, Western Europe is becoming strong enough to start pushing back against the Muslims. I want you to notice how all of that happens in the same century. Anyway, the Byzantine Empire continues. It continues for another 1,000 years after the fall of Rome. Now, as we talk about the Byzantine Empire, we should talk about Justinian. We should talk about Justinian the First. He led the Byzantine Empire to its most successful time, to the golden age of the Byzantine Empire. He led the Byzantine Empire to their height, the zenith of their power. So let's talk about him. Your textbook talks about him. Justinian the First. As we talk about Justinian the First, we need to talk about his wife, Theodora. She was actively involved in his reign. She has a really interesting testimony. She was a circus actress, so to speak, or a show actress, and in her youth, and was not a lady of any station, not a lady of any position, no class type of a lady. There are several historical accounts of her conversion, of her coming to Christ and her being converted. And then over time she falls in love with Justinian. By the way, Justinian was also the nephew of Justin I. When Justin I came to, as a very young man, when he came to Constantinople or Byzantium, all he had all he owned were the clothes on his back and a bag of bread. And he enlisted in the Byzantine army. He worked his way diligently through the ranks of the military and eventually became the emperor Justin I. Now, then he spent his time training his nephew Justinian on how to be an emperor. And you would think that Disney really gets it wrong. They really get a lot of things wrong. So a lot of times those folks that were trained to be emperors, they were not taught how to walk through a room and give the little wave and how to eat hors d'oeuvres properly. Most of the time, those who were trained to be emperors were trained with hardship. They were trained with hardship. You've probably read about Anastasia, the lost princess of Russia, and all of those kinds of things. But when Anastasia was a child, her father, one of the czars, he had a lot of children, and he required them for a time in their life to sleep on the floor, for a few years in their life to sleep on the floor. And for another time in their life, he would require them to sleep in the cold, like outside in the Russian cold. And in his view, he was training his children for the rigors of being a ruler. In other words, being willing to do anything. Well, Justinian I, as he was growing up, and his uncle was training him, his uncle gave him food rations that at times would leave him hungry frequently. And then he would be expected to, get 6 hours of sleep a night for long periods of time. Just a lot of the rigors of being trained for in their mind greatness. You had to experience great stress in order to be prepared for great leadership. But nonetheless, his wife was Justinian I falls in love with this circus actress, and at the time the laws of the Senate were such that he could not marry her. So he asked that the laws be changed, and then he married her. And actually, according to what you've read about her, notice how she actually helped him rule. She also worked in her life to end. I don't really know how to say this other than to say it. The mistreatment of women. She worked to end and fight against prostitution in Byzantium and those things. She worked for orphanages, worked to fight against and make illegal prostitution and those kinds of things. So notice some of her works that were very, very beneficial. And then you read that about her, about how at one point in time in his life he was fleeing a revolt. Hayden, if you will, please don't prop up. Don't prop up. All right, that means put your hand down and not on your chin, your face, or both of your hands down. Hey, no, you're propping. Put your hands down on your desk there. Hey, Christopher. He's not propping. Stay away. Look, guys, if y'all don't, I'm gonna have to get you to stand over there at the cubbies. Feel free to if you need to. If you need to, stand. You be disciplined. You be controlled over you.
I only got 20 more minutes.
Well, you best. All right. So Empress Theodora encourages Justinian I not to flee a revolt. In other words, he was packing his bags, he was giving up, he was surrendering, and she encourages him not to flee. In other words, stand brave, take this. And he did, and he secured his reign, he secured his rule, and things went well. All right, he does suppress the Nika revolt, which was a major time of crisis in the Byzantine Empire. If that revolt would have been successful, law and order would have gone out the window, anarchy would have entered center stage. A couple of other things that he does that are really great for the Byzantine Empire. He commissions the Justinian Code. The laws of Rome had become really complex, even to the point that some of them were contradictory. And so he said, okay, I'm going to get 10 legal scholars. You guys come in. You help me. Help me to write a new law. And that new law was the Justinian Code. He also conquered most of the Mediterranean and led the Byzantine Empire to its zenith. And then he commissioned the Hagia Sophia, this great work of art in the Byzantine Empire. You see a picture of it where? You see a picture of it on 127, the massive dome structure of it. And there's probably other pictures of it in here. Yes, on 133, you see this picture of this sanctuary, this church. That is now a museum and has been used as a mosque by Muslims, but originally it was built as a church. Okay, so we talk about Justinian the First. We also need to talk about the big church split, the Great Schism, as we talk about the Byzantine Empire. Yes.
Isn't like the Hagia Sophia like isn't it like church is made of like relay like you do like a small church, then a Orthodox church, and then a Muslim mosque?
I know that this, I don't know if there was an original church that was there and then there was something added on, but I know the way that it is pictured, the way that it's pictured on 127. In other words, the minarets that are around it, if you look on 133, you see those minarets. I believe those are Muslim and new. Does that make sense? But originally, on 133, but originally what you see on 127 was the Hagia Sophia. So there have been things added, and definitely on the inside there's a lot of the Christian wall art that has been covered up by Muslim art. So now there's a big debate over, should we remove the Muslim art to look back at the Christian, or, now you see there's this big debate over that. All right, but let's talk about the church split. In world history, as we study Christianity, under the umbrella of Christianity, there are three major divisions. Okay? There's Catholicism, like Roman Catholicism. There's Orthodoxy, and that's where this Byzantine Empire is where Orthodoxy begins. Eastern Europe, Russia, Greek Orthodoxy, all of those kind of fit under the Orthodoxy branch of Christianity. And then there's what is known as Protestantism. Those faiths and denominations that have been born of Luther and the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, and all of that. So we need to talk about this, the church split, and its production of Eastern Orthodoxy. In 1054, that's the year of the official split between the Roman Catholic Church of Rome and the hey Scott, you with us? Be careful. And the church in Byzantium. This is when they split. And basically the split was a power struggle between some of the patriarchs, some of those powerful leaders in the church. There was a disagreement over the church authority, and the church at Rome was saying they were supposed to have authority over some churches, and the church in Byzantium was saying, no, those are under our patriarchate, in other words, our domain. We should have authority over them. So there was this frustration over that. There was also some frustration between the two churches at different times over icons, the use of icons. You can read about that in your textbook, the use of icons. Some were saying this is just a tool that helps us kind of focus mentally so that we can pray. These artworks and these icons are just a tool. Others were saying when you bow down in front of that thing, it's like you're worshiping that, and it's idolatry. So there ended up being this huge debate over that, over whether it was appropriate or inappropriate. And I would call on you just to try to think of it. I would call on you just to try to think of that uh, without necessarily joining that debate, because my Jesus says you'll worship me in spirit and in truth. For the Father desires true worshipers. And some folks, even today, are still kind of fussing over icons. Even if you're not in the Roman Catholic Church or Eastern Orthodox Church, sometimes we do. If any of you are members at a Church of Christ, you will probably not have any symbolism in your sanctuary. When I say symbolism, I'm talking about these images that are kind of symbolic for things. If you belong to a Baptist church and you have a baptistry, you will likely have some symbolism. Over in the baptistry, there is frequently a river painted, or some stained glass, or a cross, or something of that, right? So you and I who attend Baptist churches and we have a cross or some symbol, or if you attend a Methodist church and there's the cross with the flame, whatever it may be, for you and I, we don't see those things as idols. We don't look to them and worship them. Instead, they're kind of symbols for us. But still, there are others in Protestant denominations today that say, well, no, we will not have any imagery, any symbol, anything of that nature. We're going to abstain from that. So I'd encourage you just not to really, just understand that Jesus said that the Lord is going to be worshipped in spirit and in truth. Remember that. So you can bow with no imagery and not be honoring the Lord. I think you can bow with imagery and be honoring the Lord. And in some cases not. It depends on the person's spirit. Okay, so eventually in this disagreement, the Pope excommunicates the Patriarch of the East. And it kind of becomes this little excommunication war. I excommunicate you. No, I excommunicate you. And it's really kind of comical the way that it plays out. And then in response, the Patriarch of the East excommunicated the Pope of Rome. So both of these guys say that the other one is really not in the church, is really a heretic, and if, according to some of the doctrines of the time, the way they were teaching some things, if they were not in the church, they could not receive the grace of God, and so they were being basically, each of them was kind of damning the other to hell, was the idea. All right, and they end up in this squabble. So in 1054, the church is split. Now, the Roman Catholic Church in the West is very similar to the Eastern Orthodox Church in the East, with the exception of governance. In the Roman Church in the West, the Pope is the supreme authority over the church. All right? And there is one universal church idea. In the Orthodox Church in the East, there are several patriarchs over national churches. And in some cases, the emperors of those nations are actually influential in the church, whereas in the West, they were not. The emperors were much less influential. So just some stuff with that. Now, the Eastern Orthodox Church becomes the Eastern Orthodox Church in Byzantium, becomes the Russian Orthodox Church, becomes the Greek Orthodox Church, and so you have to understand where it all started. All right, let's look at the siege of the Byzantine Empire. First of all, let's look at how the Byzantine Empire had to fight to their north. As far as their claiming land and doing those things, they were fighting people in Central Europe and conquering land kind of in Central Europe, their borders. As some of these Germanic tribes were coming in, even Russians and Slavs were coming in. There were some concerns. Look, we talk about Basil II, who was known as the Bulgar Slayer. he conquers for the Byzantine Empire lands that are presently Yugoslavia, Austria, what used to be Czechoslovakia, the Republic of Czech and Slovak, and those kinds of areas. By the way, he conquers for the Byzantine Empire Transylvania. He's gonna conquer those kinds of kingdoms. Now, also, as far as their north and I guess to the west, they also have to compete with Venice. Venice, a city in Italy, though Rome has crumbled, this one city in Italy ends up kind of becoming successful. And eventually Venice even sponsors the Crusaders to go and attack the city of Byzantium. It was a real mess. They also had to fight to the south. Oh, and some of this is not showing up here. Let me try to. Well, we'll talk about these three subpoints. Of course, they fight to the south and hold back for the longest time the Arab Muslim Empire. They hold back the Seljuk Turks. Finally, they are defeated by the Ottoman Turks. And when we talk about the third subpoint under this, Ottoman Turks, we have to talk about 1453, Battle of Manzikert. 1453, the Battle of Manzikert. What happens in the Battle of Manzikert? What's the outcome? The Byzantine Empire falls. They're crumbled. And I'd encourage you to read that block there, 132, the fall of Constantinople. That was kind of some tough stuff. Now, in the next few minutes, let's look at this next slide. Their contributions. The contributions of the Byzantine Empire to world civilization. Cyril and Methodius considered themselves missionaries to the Slavic peoples, the peoples of Russia, Moldova, Ukraine, those kinds of peoples. Those people didn't have an alphabet. So Cyril and Methodius developed them one that is known as the Slavic alphabet or the Cyrillic alphabet. Where does it get its name Cyrillic? From Cyril. And Cyril is that. I'm not talking about what I had for breakfast in a country accent. Cyril. Want some Cyril? Do you eat Cyril for breakfast? I'm talking about this guy, Cyril. Okay, also, another major contribution of theirs is the Eastern Orthodox Church. This spreads Christianity. Yes, for us Protestants, we would consider it to be a corrupt form of Christianity. However, it did emphasize Christ, and it's the Christian, the Judeo-Christian Bible that's advanced. Spreads it to the east, into East Europe, and also especially to Russia. There's a Romanian Orthodox Church, so think about those places. Now, also we talk about art and architecture. We talk about how their culture, their art, is kind of this blend of European culture and Near Eastern cultures, or Near Asian cultures, like Syria, Asia Minor, Jordan, Arabia, a lot of those influences. You even see those influences in their architecture, even in the church architecture, how the onion domes are kind of on a lot of the Eastern Orthodox churches. And that's kind of an architectural significance. Now, there's one other point down here. that you may not be able to read because of the display, but it says gatekeepers. Their contribution to world civilization, especially Western civilization, is that they were the security guard gatekeeper on Europe's eastern borders that held back the Arab Muslim Empire from conquering a weak Europe as the Arab Muslim Empire was in full power. They held that back. And I personally believe that God permitted the Byzantine Empire to succeed for 1,000 years. They succeeded for 1,000 years so that Christianity would have some time to grow in Western Europe, and without the Arab Muslim Empire kind of coming in, the Ottoman Turks and the Nation of Islam coming in, really changing world history. Is that because God needed Christianity to grow that way? I don't think so. I just think that it was His mercy. What I want you to do now, though, is I want you to just take a moment and turn around and look